This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. You're never aware of how dirty your glasses are until you sit in front of a lamp, glaring beams out at you, and then you see all the fragments of dust in the lenses. Basically, I'm looking at the world through a mist of smear. Hello everyone, I hope you are well. So I, like many of you watching this video, have been pretty blessed really in life to live in a time and place where literacy is a right that's granted to me. I always had access to literature that was without any censorship, without any bans, and where libraries and bookshops were accessible in person. I didn't have to wait online or drive hours to get to any of them. And thinking about it sometimes makes me feel a bit guilty that I'm just kind of basking in ludicrous self-indulgence of literature around me. So to bring myself down a peg or two, I thought I'd share with you my top 10 reading life follies that I have conducted. And I'll start with the juicy ones and work my way through them. I think honestly my biggest regret as a reader is not rereading enthusiastically. And I think this is a habit that I picked up in academia, though I could be wrong. It may be something that extends to other people outside of academia, particularly in the Goodreads world. Because when you have so much to read, you want to get through as much of it as possible because life is short. You don't know when you will stop reading for the rest of your life. So rereading felt like a really inefficient process of getting through all the information that I needed. And particularly in academia, you tend to write excessive notes and really detailed notes about things in the hopes that you don't have to reread that content again. But after 4 years, I found out that is the least efficient way of researching, quite frankly. Because reading once with exceptionally detailed notes does not help you in the long term. And really the PhD process has shown me that, because every time I come back to a text, either my notes, even if they're detailed, do not give me the content that I needed from that thing, or when I go back to read it, I read it in a whole new light, and then I realise that the thing that I have extracted from a quote means something different to me after having read other content out there. And again, the person that's really drilled this into me is my recent read, which is by William Marks, The Libraries of the Mind. And I shared this quote on a short, but it was the quote that if you ever visited a country once, you do not know that country. And reading is the same. You can read a book once, but you do not know it in the same way you can only visit a country once and not know the country. And even if you visit it multiple times, even if you live in a country, do you really know the country? So yeah, that's kind of changed my perspective on reading, particularly academically. And even talking to people who have been in the field for much longer than me, they all reread voraciously. Rather than go back to their notes, they actually have fewer notes and actually to read the text over and over and over again to try and get it in their brain so they can work with the text more in a raw way. I think that's something that maybe social media has drilled into me ever so slightly to make it more like aesthetic. You know, there's nothing really to prove for it. You can't prove that you've worked hard if you just read it. You don't have these glorious pretty notes or notebooks spilling out of the pages when you just read something over and over again. But reality, I've actually become more in tune with these texts when I've read them over and over again. And I shamed myself a lot. I think with a lot of particularly theory, I really shamed myself that I had to keep going back to it. There's certain texts that I have to keep going back to and I still don't really get it, even though I do get it. I don't get it enough to be an expert in it. But because I've had to go back to this text 7, 8, 9 times, and even if it's short, I'm like, oh, I really despise this text, but I realise that I get more out of it than ever reading the notes that I made. Like, those are completely worthless, but the text itself offers me more value. But before I keep yabbering on to the other ideas that I want to talk about today, I'd like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. So whether you're just starting out or managing a growing brand, Squarespace makes it easy to create a beautiful website, engage with the audience, and sell anything from product to content to time, all in one place and all on your terms. All my iterations of being online, from a blogger to now running my own business, have gone through Squarespace. I've been currently working on my first of writing workshop courses, which I can host on my Squarespace website because it allows me to have members-only content for my community, so I can sell access to online courses or blogs or videos. And the memberships that I sell can be purchases, whether they're a one-time fee or subscription access to multiple months worth of it. And then when it comes to evolving my business, I can make smarter business decisions with Squarespace's intuitive built-in analytics tools, which lets me review website traffic or learn where to focus my engagement or track revenue from bookings and invoices or product sales all in one place. So I don't have to have all these tabs open. So if that sounds interesting to you, go to squarespace.com for a free trial. And then when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Lady of the Library to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. The second one I'm kind of categorising as phases that I went through which ruined my enjoyment of reading, because there's multiple things that I came under this umbrella when I thought of like what really ruined my experience with reading and literature, and there's multiple. The first one is booktube. So back in the day I used to be a booktuber. I don't identify myself with that now. I would identify myself as more of a essayist who talks about literature. I'm not really into just like talking about books like I used to back in the day. It was always what I read, what I enjoyed. Hate it. I really hated that part of my life. I don't like anything to do with booktube anymore. Booktube really, really, really harmed my enjoyment of books, the community, everything about it. It's not what something other people find. Lots of people love booktube. People who watch this channel love booktube. For me, being a booktuber, even though I didn't actually intend to be, because the term came out after I started. I started talking about books. I started out doing video essays originally about literature. Like my first one was on Wuthering Heights, and then it was Oliver Twist. And then I just started talking about the books I was reading at university. But then it became a genre of where people talked about things and hauled books and showed books. No, it put me off reading for a long time. After that, I think I just had a lot of negative experiences in the booktube community, not reflective of everyone else's past experiences. A lot of people are really happy with booktube, and it just wasn't for me. Another thing that I have unlearned, to the horror of those around me, is not finishing books that I don't enjoy. My partner feels mortified whenever he sees me put down a book after 100 pages. And I'm like, well, I didn't really like it. I'm not going to carry on with this, because he's one that has to finish everything he reads, and I know it's one for everything. Again, I think what has helped is academia in this way, with the amount of texts and things that you read, like just papers, articles, academic articles I'm talking about, you don't finish a lot of them because they're not always pertinent to what you're studying. So you start reading it and you put it away, and I think that kind of habit has just like inflicted how I read in general. I will read just chapters of certain books, and there are certain books that I haven't read all of them, but I've read lots of the books themselves, because I just read certain chapters and dipped in and out when I need to. But then on the other hand, reading academically is also a bad habit, because I tend to be a bit dead-hearted when I'm reading. I cannot suspend my disbelief. It's just impossible. I've always been someone who's not very much inclined with the imagination anyway, but I become incredibly impatient with certain books. And over the years, I've really distanced myself from Goodreads, and I know a lot of people have moved from Goodreads to apps such as, I think it's Story, and I just can't be bothered. I don't care enough about the apps to transfer myself over to another app. But back in the day, Goodreads was just sort of a little bit of a wormhole in terms of my self-esteem, and I kind of just use it to document a book that I've read and look at other books that may be of interest, but I don't really employ the app to check my stats and things like that. So I'm not interested in turning to another app entirely, but I think being app orientated with my reading ruined the experience for me as well, which is why I kind of stay clear of them now. Another mistake that I made was knowing my preferences and tastes for things, and then expressing that, and then being convinced that I should try this particular book of that genre that I don't like. I wasted a lot of money and a lot of time reading sci-fi and fantasy books, which I knew I would not like, even though they're really, really popular ones in the field, and everyone's like, oh, this will change your mind, or this will change your mind. And I never did. It never worked for me. And I used to feel really upset by it, because I felt very peer pressured to read books by people who were really adamant fans about it. And when I would come into work, those people would ask me, have you finished it yet? Have you finished it yet? And I had the awkward conversation of telling them I didn't like the book that they kept pushing on me. If I come naturally to that book and find it, we can talk about it. But having that awkward conversation of me knowing myself very, very well and my tastes and preferences, and not having any prejudice against a genre. I just know how my brain works. I know that I can't see visual images, which sci-fi and fantasy, for example, rely heavily on. They rely heavily on you being able to visualise a scene. If you can't see anything, it's incredibly dull to experience. And it's not that I haven't read any good fantasy and sci-fi. I enjoyed Lord of the Rings, again, but not my favourite. I really enjoyed The Lies of Locke Lamora. I really enjoyed A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I have learned my lesson to not read any text that someone is pushing on you. And if you are one of the people who pushes someone to read a text, please stop. It's as someone who's very anxious about telling people they don't like their book, that they encourage them to read, not their book personally, but a book that they really encouraged, it's a really awkward conversation. Just say, oh, there's a recommendation I would give. If you ever get into fantasy, I can give you a recommendation, but leave it at that. In the same way, I don't expect lots of people to like ancient Greek texts. You know, I'm not pushing people to read certain texts unless they come to me to ask about it. And speaking of which, that takes me on to the idea of lying. I was trying to think back, have I ever lied about reading a book that I haven't read or something like that? I don't think I did, because I was always quite open and honest about books that I wasn't interested in, or hadn't read, because particularly at university, you'll look like a fool if you say you've read something and then the person you're talking to just happened to do an essay on it. So it can punch you in the gut. But I think where I have sort of bended the truth in the past is lying about my interest in other people's books. I'm not very good at knowing how to talk to people about their text. So say there's someone's telling me all about their book, I go, oh, that sounds really interesting. Well, I don't really think it sounds that interesting. I'm just having to have conversation with someone. And then they go out of their way to then buy me a copy of that book. And now, out of politeness, I have to read the book that they've given me, even though I would never have read this. I'm so sorry, Blue Sisters and Cocomellas and all that jazz. Like, I'm like, oh, now I feel pressured to read this book that I would never have picked up. I was just saying that sounded interesting. And I don't know how to handle this now. Maybe perhaps I'm too autistic to know how to handle these conversations. Maybe I just go forward going like, oh, not for me, but good for you. Like, it just sounds a bit harsh though, doesn't it? You're meant to try and engage people, but I've always ended up being given the book. Bless their hearts, I've had very generous people in my life, but then they give me the book to read, or they loan me the book to read. I'm like, oh no, now you have to read it, because now they really want you to read it too. It tends to be older people, to be fair. It tends to be older people in my life, like family members, or older relatives or some relation that tend to do this, not really peers. It is really awkward when that happens. Maybe I go further. I can't lie about having read it, because they'll ask me my opinions on it, and then my opinions are always quite brutal because I'm always quite honest. So I know it's terrible. I should stop lying about my interest in other people's books. And very similarly, although it's not entirely related to it, I have also made the mistake in the past of reading to please other people rather than reading to please what I genuinely love. And whilst it's not the same, I mean, it's kind of related to the people who say, oh, you have to read this book. I know you don't like sci-fi, but read this one, it'll change your mind. And I'm always like, no, it didn't, but thank you anyway for trying. That wasn't really to please them. It was just, I mean, maybe it was in some way. But when I think about it differently, I definitely read books that I didn't want to please my family or to please a teacher that I had no interest in. Or rather, more often than not, I didn't read books that I was interested in to please my family. So I had a lot of fights when I was younger with a relative who insisted, now forgive me because this is a horrible sentiment that I'm about to come out my mouth, that American literature isn't real literature. I know. So whenever I read any American books, they would get angry at me and upset with me for not reading real literature, to quote unquote them, which was atrocious. Moby Dick is my favourite book, but I love a lot of American literature, you know, but particularly as a teenager, I was really loving, you know, Of Mice and Men and, you know, The Great Gatsby. So I was really upset that I had someone in my life that kept telling me not to read those texts. So I avoided reading them or talking about them to please them, because they didn't think that that was worth my time. It's really bizarre. People are really strange sometimes, aren't they? But yes, I definitely did more not reading of books to please other people and read what they wanted me to please them. But I felt like I was really denying myself, and I would never do that again. It's ridiculous. Forcing people to read books according to your standards is bonkers. Another thing which ruined my reading experience and how I read in general was over taking notes when I was reading. Again, this is more potentially academia leaning, but particularly when I'm reading secondary resources and academic papers and articles, I would take so many notes. I didn't actually really enjoy the process of reading what was written, because you're trying to just like scrape it and get information out of it as much as possible. It becomes quite clinical, and I think that did ruin my experience of reading academically, whereas now I've lent into more, I'm going to reread more than I'm going to write notes and just keep rereading text over and over again and having it part of me with tiny bullet points. I make tiny bullet points of like what this article is about so I can refer back to that, see if I refer to that article. But, you know, I don't take loads of notes anymore. The only time I become incredibly over analytical with writing is when I'm doing, like I always use this in my example, it's right here. So when like a book for studies, say like this text, but again, that's not over analysing. It's going quite detailed because I found it really interesting to annotate. I don't annotate for every text that I come across. It's only when I'm like, oh, this is worth something to me. Like I'm really, really enjoying the process of highlighting things and I want to research this later. That's what annotating means to me. I'm not someone who overtakes notes anymore, because I used to take notes all the time, and then when I read back my old text, I'm like, why did you highlight that? Like, what was the point? Because it's not clear. It's obvious in the moment when you're doing it, but as someone 10 years extracted from that person, I'm like, why did you write that? It doesn't make any sense. But I think over annotating really did strip the joy, primarily out of academic texts and secondary resources. Also, certain habits have pushed me to burnout. I think a lot of people experience burnout in terms of reading. And obviously things like over academically reading texts can lead to burnout. But more so, I think the thing that ruined reading for me and burned me out more was me evaluating or over analysing what this text's purpose was. So I was saying, well, why do I read this? Can I make a video out of this text, or can I use this for my PhD? If not, it's not worth reading. And that mindset really burned me out quickly, because then I became kind of scared of everything, because I was like, well, is this worth it? Should I read it? I'm not sure if it's worth it. And I then wouldn't read it and then panic and fell behind on my reading, because I was just so scared of reading the wrong thing or wasting time reading, because I have a finite resources, I have finite time to finish my PhD. So I think that really, really damaged my reading process. That's the biggest mistake I've made in my reading life, I would say, is working out what this text is for. Obviously there's reading text for the purpose of like having a why for reading a text is essential, particularly when reading academic articles, because you can read too much and you're just like, well, what am I reading this for? But when it comes to actually just reading texts themselves, having too much of a focus on the why makes reading really painful and incredibly clinical, and the pressure is too much. Like having a really strong why is just too much. And I would say that's my biggest mistake. Now, I know people are going to ask me about, do I feel any regrets or mistakes about my book collection? I know a lot of people really suffer from the shame of unread books. My partner's one of them. He gets very anxious about buying a new book if he hasn't read other books on his shelf. And a lot of people will see my collection as a huge mistake, a huge anxiety-ridden mistake. It's not a mistake for me. Surprisingly, because I'm a dipper in and outer, I've gone through a lot of these books and they were just like 2 chapters that I've read, particularly with non-fiction, because I needed it for that purpose. And I was like, oh, there's a really good book, I'll come back to this, but I don't mark it on Goodreads because it hasn't been finished from cover to cover. But most of my books have been used once for something. It's like I used it for a chapter, or I used it for a reference for something. I can see why people would get anxiety about having books that they haven't read at all and feeling guilty about that. Again, it could be a much worse habit in my life, really, couldn't it? But again, thankfully, I'm guilt-ridden by so much more in life. This is the thing I feel least guilty about. I feel really proud of curating a library of references and resources that is useful for me. Like I'm really proud of that, because I don't feel anxious. I don't have the information available to me. I do have the information, and I have it all organised in a library now where I can just go and pop over and find it. Like, it's great. However, here's a tip. One thing that I regret about collecting reference books, thankfully I found out quite early on, always check a publisher website before buying a book. Yes, support your local independence, but also publisher websites themselves need support too. And a lot of the time, particularly with academic texts, they tend to do a lot of discounts. So I always usually buy academic textbooks from their websites. They do summer sales, winter sales, they even do Black Friday a lot of the time. I've saved a lot of money on big chunky books that have been 40% off on their website, or even 50% off sometimes on academic websites. So big mistake is not buying your books from there. Another mistake I would say I made with my reading process was turning reading into work. That has really impacted how I function as a person, because reading was such a huge part of my life that because I'm reading all the time, I feel like I'm working all the time, which led to very severe mental health and health issues that became manifested as chronic symptoms that resulted in me needing a year out of university to heal physically from chronic stress. Chronic stress is no joke, people. It can kill you. Just public service announcement. Please get help. It's really, really dangerous. I'm speaking from experience. I think knowing that all my work relies around how well I read, how often I read, and having work and reading is basically the same thing. Sounds like a dream, but also it's not how I wanted it to be, because the production line is harder. The production line isn't easy when it's just you doing things. And I'm incredibly, I have great admiration for YouTubers who manage to put out like a video essay every week. I don't know how they do it, particularly if they're doing it alone. I have no idea how they're doing it, because I can't read that quickly and write that quickly, and that pressure to be like producing on what you read, and then the PhD being the same, because time is ticking by and you have to write things fast enough. It's been quite, I don't use the word lightly, but it has been, with my health particularly being affected by it, it's been a pretty traumatic experience the past 4 years. I'm not making that over dramatic. I'm not turning that into a melodrama in any shape or form. I'm still recovering from a lot of damage that is done, and having that mindset of you have to read, you have to understand all this concept for a single video that you have to produce next week, and next week you have to have a whole new one, but you also have to submit 5,000 words to your supervisor next week, and then you also have to submit that conference paper, and it's incredibly ruthless, because you don't have time to actually comprehend what you're doing. You don't have the time to be like, okay, can I enjoy reading this? No, I can't. I don't have time for enjoyment. So reading for some kind of production line has been really hard, and quite frankly I don't know how I'm going to fix it. I'm hoping to fix it by just being able to punctuate potentially with videos like this where I'm just a bit more chatty. I don't have to rely on a heavy research script, but I'm not sure if people will be upset with that. So that pressure of maybe I'm always technically reading to please people in some shape or form, but I haven't read for joy for a long time. The only book that I've read that's not related to work has been book club books, and all of which I've hated, because again I'm reading for other people, I assume, because everyone else is reading it, so I'll read it too. The books I want to read have buggered off somewhere. I've got no idea where they are. As you can tell from most of this video, I still make these mistakes today, all of which are deliciously human, and I am too. So most of the time I'm still making these mistakes. But I would say the biggest mistake that I still make to this day is buying more books, even when you have books to go. The amount of times I'm like, oh yes, I will get that from the charity shop. Oh yes, I've asked for this for my birthday. Oh yes, I've got a book voucher from Christmas. Because I ask for book vouchers for everything. I ask for book vouchers for like Valentine's Day. I ask it for Easter. I ask them for Christmas. I ask them for my birthday. So I always have like a stash of book vouchers. And I'm terrible. I should save them. I should use them on other people. I'm like, no, my present. I want to get it too. But then they always just bring me so much joy. So it is, again, whilst it's a mistake that I have a to be read pile that could topple the Library of Alexandria, I'm not that bothered by it. I find great delight in being so humanly flawed with my reading habits, and I love them. Like, there's very little in this world, there's very little that brings true joy in our lives. And when I come into this room, I'm like, oh, I feel at peace, I feel joy. And there's no mistakes for that. Thankfully, there's no shame or guilt. I just feel guilty in terms of, to the books, I feel guilty. I'm like, I'm so sorry, I told you I'd come back to you and I haven't, I'm so sorry. It's to them, because they have personalities to me in some shape or form. They all kind of have like a little bit of an attitude about them. Some of my books are absolute wankers. Like, there's some of them have a really, like, yeah, I think I do personify my books. That's quite a strange habit to have. I realise that now, saying it out loud. But I talk about them as if they're people, particularly if I'm having a bad time with them, like, oh, he's being a right dick, this book. And it's not even, it's just a book. It's just the text itself. Mainly Helen Zizur and I have a lot of arguments together, and if we ever end up in an afterlife where we're talking to each other, I'm going to learn French purely to have a word with her. Let her speak my mind at Helen Zizur, because I have a lot to say. There's so many authors I'd like to talk to, but because I can't, I talk to their books instead and tell them exactly what I feel about them, and their need for an editor, and their need to be clearer, and then why they're making a big scene out of something. It doesn't make sense. But yeah, that's just a random ending to this. I hope you enjoyed this silly video about the 10 reading mistakes that I've made. As you can tell, it's quite extensive, but I'd love to know what reading mistakes you have made in your lifetime, if any of them resonated with you, or if you didn't realise that was something you did too, really. But thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please, if you did, please consider liking and subscribing, or leaving a comment about your mistakes. And thank you, as always, to my Patreons, and also my top tier Patreons, my wonderful librarians. We have Cody Martin, we have Eric Taylor, Yvonne and Yvonne, Jenny Edvade, Marina, Psycho Teddy, Fritz Anderson, Wee Lauren, and Andrea Bazil. Thank you all so much for being wonderful supporters on their Patreon. But thank you ever so much for watching and being kind and supportive. And thank you for all of you who purchased my merch over the weekend. Really appreciate it too. And I'll be happy and healthy. And remember, books save lives. So keep reading.